Forget about Abdul Carter for a second. If the Browns want to take the best player available at 2, it's going to be Travis Hunter. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Travis Hunter is now a hot name being linked to the Browns at number 2 overall, and it actually makes more sense than taking Abdul Carter. Kirk Cousins to Cleveland becoming even more inevitable, and for the first time, we have a positive Jeremiah Owuw-Koramoah update from the Browns brass. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And we know the Browns have a very difficult decision to make here. And a little over 3 weeks from now, April 24th, when they're on the clock at number 2, choosing a player, deciding whatever it is that they're going to do with the number 2 overall pick, Cam Ward's likely to be off the board. And so this conversation is very much turned into, as we know, a debate over, do you go quarterback because you need a quarterback and take Shedeur Sanders, who, again, I think is worthy of being picked there if the Browns view him in that same light, even though others might not. Meanwhile, the other option is Abdul Carter, it seems. Those seem to be the two sides of the fan base that have sort of formed here. People who are, it's funny, Kevin Stefanski at the owners' meetings this week said he's not going to be banging the table for any one player. He sees a lot of talented players that could be options there. I think the fan base at this point is kind of at a point where there's one section of the fan base banging the table for one specific idea or path to walk down on draft night, and another one that's doing that's banging the table for another. The easy and obvious one is quarterback, because it's the most important position in the game and you need one. And so you're in this position to draft one highly. Why not do it? And then the other one is Abdul Carter. That seems like where the split has sort of formed between these two contingencies of the fan base that have sort of developed here. But I'm going to be honest, like, if you're trying to think about best player available and what the Browns should do when it comes to taking somebody at 2 that isn't a quarterback, if they're going to do that and that's going to be the strategy, I actually think Travis Hunter makes more sense than Carter. And I'm using Jimmy Haslam's quotes, Jimmy Haslam's press conference transcripts sort of against him here, not against him, but as context here, where he flat out, said it might take a year or 2 to figure out this quarterback position, and made it known like they're not going to force the issue on finding a quarterback just because they need that position filled. And so if he's not forcing anybody to take a quarterback at 2, he's not going to demand somebody gets taken. He's going to let his guys figure it out. And if they view that somebody's worthy, they'll do it. If not, then they got to take best player available. And so understanding that the Browns are trying to go about this in a way, with some patience, and that Jimmy Haslam seems to be showing some patience in the way that he's going to let this team sort of retool and rebuild and figure itself out. I feel like the path they're going to go is going to be take best player available 2, wait on a quarterback, and we'll get somebody like, again, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, whatever, later on in the first round or whatever it might be. It's just feeling more and more like that's going to be the path forward. Maybe I'm wrong, and Shedeur Sanders is still the guy, and I would love that because I think he's worthy, as I've said. But if it comes down to what Haslam is saying, where he's like, we're not forcing the issue at quarterback, we're going to think about this from a smart perspective and take the best player on the board that we think is going to benefit our football team and be a foundational piece. I think that player is more so. I think Travis Hunter is more that than Abdul Carter is. And I'll explain. I think there's been something sort of misconstrued when it comes to Abdul Carter. I have seen comments start to percolate where people are calling him a generational talent. And I think that is, I think it's patently ridiculous. Maybe not ridiculous because he is a great player and I think he's going to be great at the next level. But I think people are misconstruing the real conversation about Abdul Carter and the type of player that he is and how good he's going to be for thinking he's better than in terms of like coming out of college where he's at. Then like I think that people are trying to put him on par with other can't miss players, which there are that's nobody's really can't miss, but there are some rarities where that happens. And I don't think he's there. You know, the best example is the guy who'd be playing opposite of Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett coming out in 2017 was a no-brainer pick at number one. Unless you were going to do, it's kind of a similar situation. Unless the Browns are going to go quarterback and take like a Mitch Trubisky, it was obvious that you take Myles Garrett because he was truly a generational talent. Everybody felt that way. And there was no weaknesses in his game. There was nothing that really concerned you. And the Browns pulled the trigger and they've reaped the benefits of it. Myles Garrett is a bona fide, going to be, enshrined in Canton one day player. And, it was an obvious pick that year. I don't think that player exists in this 2025 draft. I don't think there's somebody that you absolutely positively have to take if you're not going quarterback because he's going to transform the NFL and he's going to be a truly transcendent player. And that coming out of college already. Those players are few and far between anyway. But it feels like that is the way Carter's being talked about. Like you have to take Carter because he's a generational talent. And I just don't see that. And frankly, let me rephrase. It's not that I don't see that he can be great. I just don't think he is a generational player or should be dubbed a generational player coming out of the college level right now. He's a guy who's played he's been a pass rusher for basically 1 year. He played linebacker before that. He's got this foot issue that I do think should be somewhat of a red flag. Maybe it's not concerning enough for somebody not to take him high, but it is something that's notable to the player that he is. That is something that could derail your career and prevent him from ever becoming a great player in this league. But he's smaller sized. People have brought that up. Like I don't see him as like this can't miss prospect. I think he's really good. I think he's worthy of going in the top 3, 4, 5 picks. But I'm not going to sit here and like make it bigger than it is. And to be fair, like I don't even necessarily think we can say that about Travis Hunter in this draft. Like I'm not sitting here saying Travis Hunter is a generational player either. That remains to be seen. But I do think the ceiling is higher on Travis Hunter being that maybe even just slightly than it is for Carter. And part of that is he plays both ways and wants to play both ways. But to even do that to this point in his career, I think speaks to the level of athlete that he is. And so there's something there just intangibly that he brings to the table that Carter doesn't. And I do think too, like, yes, Carter is consensus number one defensive lineman in this class. There are other really good defensive linemen in this class that I think could turn out to be really good players. I'm really high on Mike Green, for example. Shamar Stewart is another one. He had a really good combine, but his tape is great as well. Like those two guys could be other great pass rushers in this class that you could get later on. And it's a deep class. Travis Hunter, on the other hand, he is being graded as corner number one by most and wide receiver at least like 1A alongside Tet. Like he is that good. And people have seen it. They're evaluating him that way. They're grading him that way. I see it. I would value him that way and grade him that way. And as we know, the Browns have said they view him more as a wide receiver. It would still seem a little strange for me for them to take a wide receiver, somebody they view primarily as a wide receiver at 2. But Hunter's different in that, yes, he has the ability to play both sides. And so I think if you're talking about like best player available, he fits that billing more than Carter does, even though maybe it's not a perfect selection there. And it's a little fluky because why is a team that doesn't have a quarterback taking a primarily wide receiver that they see at 2? But like the tape says it all. I mean, guy won the Heisman for a reason. The ball skills are great, as Angie Berry's brought up. Great route runner. There's so many times where like he makes a play that makes a bunch of guys miss and can do some different things on top of being a solid corner. in his own right as well. How the Browns would utilize him would be interesting because, again, in viewing him as a more of a wide receiver, that would generally it's going to be easier to make him a corner and then have a package for him on offense. But if the Browns told him, like, we're going to use you mostly on offense and then we'll throw you in on nickel sometimes, maybe they would do things differently. I don't know. But there's more, I think, potential for Travis Hunter to be the generational player of this class, if there even is one in this class, than I think even Abdul Carter. And I don't think that should be misconstrued, which is why I'm sitting here telling you, if the Browns decide they're not going quarterback because they're not going to rush this thing, they're not going to force the issue, and they don't feel like anybody's worthy, I can get behind that. I can understand that. I honestly think going with Travis Hunter at 2 makes more sense if the strategy is best player available over Abdul Carter. What say you? You might feel differently. Let me know in the comments. You can always chime in via and talk about it on the show. But speaking of a team that doesn't have a quarterback, the more the owner meetings have, the more the offseason rolls along, the more information that we get, particularly out of the owners' meetings this week. Sure sounds like the Browns and Kirk Cousins is going to happen. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Last year, I used Gametime for the first time when I bought tickets to see Ohio State, Michigan with my wife. Disappointing result, yes, but I get to say I saw the National Championship Buckeyes in person last year, and now Gametime is my go-to app for buying tickets. In fact, I just bought tickets to a concert this fall for my wife's birthday. Keep that between us, though. I haven't given them to her yet. Don't forget that when you use Gametime, make sure you use the Gametime picks, providing curation to make it easier to find better value on tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so it feels like the more of the offseason rolls along. Like, I'll put it to you this way. And my mom used to watch Days of Our Lives growing up as a kid when I was still at home with her as before I started going to school. I had like a half day of kindergarten or whatever the hell it was. And there was that old line at the start of the show, like sand through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives. And that's what it feels like when it comes to the Browns offseason about a number of things. Like, I'm ready for the draft to be here, but also as it pertains to the Kirk Cousins situation, because every day it seems like we get more and more information or more insider insight in giving credence to the idea that Kirk Cousins is coming to Cleveland at some point. And I don't just mean coming to Cleveland to spend some time here for whatever reason he was here and eat at a local fast food chain. I mean, like, come to Cleveland to be the team's starting quarterback, the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback. And that's been the case this week. The more that's been said, the more that's been talked about. You got Diana Rossini talking about it. You got Ian Rappaport talking about it. Everybody seems to be connecting the dots on the Browns are the team that seem most involved in the Kirk Cousins market, most potentially willing to swing a deal for him when the time is right, which at this point we know the timing on that is going to be after the NFL draft, when he's seen what teams have done. He wants to avoid getting Michael Penix again. So he won't waive his no trade clause until he knows he can go somewhere and probably be the starter. So this is setting the stage for the scenario that I kind of mapped out. I think it was late last week, where it just feels like the Browns quarterback room at this point is going to be, again, think about it. We're late in the veteran market at this point. There's not a lot of, it's slim pickings. You're not getting anybody that you really feel great about, or, is going to give you a good chance to win next year anyway. If you were to sign Carson Wentz or Joe Flacco or whoever, it's just kind of like a very meh signing at this point. Maybe Joe Flacco is a little more exciting because it's Joe Flacco and this fan base loves him. But other than that, you're not really getting much from these guys. So there's only so many moves that make sense, right? For the team to try to be competitive next year. One of them would be drafting somebody at 2. But if they're all in on Kirk and that's the route they're going, that probably doesn't happen. And so at this point, with 3 weeks before the draft, and your quarterback room is it consists of one person. It consists of Kenny Pickett. It's got one healthy quarterback in it. If like this is where we're at, and because of that, it just feels like this is setting up where the Browns will take somebody maybe at 33. That's a developmental piece, a quarterback that you're looking to develop. I keep saying Jalen Milroe because it just feels like that's going to happen, in spite of how I feel about Jalen Milroe as an NFL player. But it feels like it's going to be Jalen Milroe, and then it feels like you're going to trade for Kirk Cousins, and that's going to be your quarterback room. This is like, feels like it's becoming more and more the end result here. The tea leaves are kind of pointing to it, if you will. And so I'm of the belief right now that that's how this thing will ultimately shake out, and that Kirk Cousins will be here as the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And it's just every day we're getting more. Like it's another person saying, yeah, the Browns are still in on Kirk. The Browns make the most sense for Kirk. And everyone's now talking about it this week like it's going to happen. It doesn't seem like there's much more of a market for Kirk other than the Cleveland Browns, who, let's face it, like they're the type of team that would potentially do something like this because they are desperate for a quarterback to get to be competitive next year and to start at the head of that room. And Kirk would fit the billing because of his connections with Kevin Stefanski, as we know, and how he knows this offense and all those different things. Now, the biggest question comes down to how much are the Browns willing to give up to make a deal, to push a deal to the finish line. It's going to take some sort of draft capital, I would imagine, for the Falcons to eat some of that contract. And the higher the pick, the more money they're probably going to be inclined to eat in a potential trade scenario. And along the lines of how much they're willing to eat, how much money are the Browns going to be responsible for? Because we know their cap situation is not great. They don't have a lot of money to spend. You know, they're sort of penny pinching here to try to make things fit, while also creating cap space to try to roll over to next year, because they are going to have to eat a big chunk of Deshaun Watson's deal next year. Once he gets released, that's where everything's pointing right now, especially after Jimmy Haslam's comments. They'll get released post June 1st. They'll eat some of it next year. They'll eat some of it in 2027 as well. And so understanding that, like, they got to sort of navigate this cap situation. They can't be taking on the full $27.5 million due in base salary to Kirk next year. This year rather. They're going to have to sort of split that with the Falcons in some capacity. I would imagine they want to get it under $10 million, probably even less than that. And so what type of draft capital is it going to take to do that? Now, the other part of this too is, like, in theory, there's always a way to make the money work. We see the Browns do this all the time. We see Andrew Berry do this all the time. You set up those void years on the back end, you push money into them, you kick the can down the road, and no one's the wiser. You just kind of do it that way. It's life in the NFL these days. And I get why they do that. You got to pay that bill at some point, but you're going to pay it when the salary cap is higher and you have more money to sort of use to, and the percentage of cap that you're eating in dead money isn't quite as large when you create that situation with the void years and all those things. But the problem for me is, like, void years make sense when it's Myles Garrett, who's going to be here for a long period of time. It even made sense with Deshaun Watson to an extent, because you were planning on him being here for a while and being your franchise quarterback, even though it blew up in their face and now it looks bad. At the time, it made sense, like, yeah, we're going to do the void year thing and just kick the can down the road. We'll pay these chunks of money, or we'll allocate these chunks of money to our salary cap later. It makes sense for people like, Joe Bitonio, who had, I think, at least a year or two void years on his deal. Wyatt Teller, Denzel Ward, David Njoku. Like, it made sense for all those guys. They were core foundational pieces on this team. It doesn't necessarily make sense to trade for a quarterback that's already going to cost you a certain amount of money and then manipulate his contract in a way where you're converting base to bonus money, adding void years and kicking the can down the road, because Kirk is a temporary solution. He might not have much left in the tank. And you might realize that pretty quickly and understand, like, he's here 1 year and that's it. And you're going to move on from him after 2025 and pay whatever the dead money is, because there will be some money still probably owed to him. That's guaranteed already. But you don't want to pay the $35 million in base salary next year. So if you move on from him, you don't have to pay that. And so how much money would you actually want to tack on the void years for a guy who's 36 at the end of his career and may not be here much longer than a year, maybe 2 years if things go exceptionally well? Who knows? But that's the biggest dilemma. It's like, when you're adding void years and sort of playing the salary cap manipulation game the way Andrew Berry does, Yeah, you can get away with that when it's players that are going to be here for a longer period of time. There's no promise that Kirk Cousins is here beyond 2025. And so that becomes an interesting logistical hurdle among several logistical hurdles that the Browns have to clear if they are to acquire Kirk Cousins. But man, as things stand right now, it feels inevitable that that pairing is going to happen. That the Browns post draft will swing a trade for Kirk Cousins. He'll come here. He'll be their quarterback next year with whatever rookie they draft at some point, waiting in the wings as you know as he learns and develops, and Kenny Pickett as a backup, and they're off and running to this great new future. And I guess addressing maybe the quarterback position more prominently with next year's draft with a player that they maybe like a little bit more. We'll see. But that's what feels like is trending towards. And we'll see how that comes to fruition if it does over the next couple of weeks. But the way everyone's talking about it, it sure feels like it's going to come to fruition. With that said, we finally got a positive update on an injured player on the defense, a star player on the defense. You're going to want to hear this because it was the first time it seemed like things were trending in the right direction. We'll talk about it coming up next in the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so along with everything that's been said, and there's been a lot this week at the NFL owners meetings, from Stefanski, from Andrew Berry to the Haslams as well. One of the most notable things that sort of flew under the radar, I would say, this week was that Andrew Berry did have some comments on Jeremiah Owuw-Koramoah and his status as things stand right now. With his injured neck, which he injured in week 8 against the Ravens last year, trying to tackle. Obviously, Derrick Henry left the game, and ever since then, there's been a very ominous responses given by the team in terms of his future. Really in like on the field, like in football, it was unclear if he was even going to ever be able to play again. But Barry was asked about it at the combine, and for the first time, it seemed like there was like a positive vibe from the messaging. And so here's what he was asked about it. His comments were, quote, "He is progressing, which is a positive. I'll be honest, it is still a little bit nebulous in terms of what the time frame looks like. So we are really trying to deal with it week to week and month to month." So still no clarity in terms of him being back, if he will be back this year, if he'll be back at all. They're taking it one step at a time, as they should. But noting that he's progressing and that there was a positive thing, a positive step for him, it should be taken into account. And again, just the messaging in general felt more positive, or like we were getting somewhere with this than it had in previous months when people were asked about this at the top of the organization, Stefanski, Berry, etc. Because it was generally just like a standard PR style answer that they would give whenever JOK came up before. It was always very, well, he's in the gathering information stage, and we'll let you know when we have more information to share, which that just paints this picture of he's done. Like his career's over. Like he doesn't know if he's ever going to play again, which probably means he won't. I think it's how a lot of people interpreted that, myself included. And so it's good to know that they feel like they're making progress in terms of, or seeing some progress with him finally in terms of getting some clarity on his future. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to play this year. I would probably bet against it anyway, just because of how this process has gone already. But if he's even able to get back to the field at some point, I think that's obviously a win for him. That's obviously a win for Browns fans. Everybody loves JOK. They want him out there. He's a tremendous player. The Browns are better with him. And it's the one pick Andrew Berry can, hang his hat on as nailing it 10 out of 10. So everyone wants to see him get back out there, but it has to be on his own accord. It's just mostly good that we finally got an update that felt like there was optimism. And I think that's the most important thing here. Now, in the meantime, the Browns have sort of addressed the linebacker position this offseason already in a number of different ways. They brought back Devin Bush, who I think played really, really well last year, filling in a lot at the linebacker position. Jordan Hicks is obviously back this year as well to sort of be like the man with the green dot, sort of captaining the defense in the middle of that group. And they signed Jerome Baker, a guy who Browns fans, I think, have wanted to get to Cleveland at some point throughout his career. Ohio State guy, been in the league for a while now. And he comes in, gets a chance to be part of that linebacker group. And so you've kind of, kept that unit intact with players who know what they're doing, know what the goals and, what the defense is supposed to look like because they played in it, and you get some new faces in there as well. But it's linebackers never been like the Browns' biggest strength. With JOK, it's better for sure. And you want him out there, but they're trying to sort of, I think, piece it together the best they can. And if JOK can be part of their plans in 2025, great. If he isn't, I think they have some at least solutions in the short term, at least, to sort of get through at least next season and see what JOK's status is beyond that. So no promises in terms of when he'll be back, if he'll be back this year or beyond or whatever. But at least it felt like Andrew Berry was giving us something to feel better or good about when it comes to Jeremiah Owuw-Koramoah, because nobody wants to see his career over, and everybody wants to see him back out there for the Browns at some point. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you hanging out. Appreciate you stopping by. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Certainly more to come this week. I'm sure I fired some people up talking about Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter. Again, let me know in the comments how you feel about that debate, because this is the new debate on these out in these Cleveland streets. If it should be Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, if you're taking best player available, or if you're still on the quarterback train, that's cool too. I'm sure we'll have more to say on that subject matter here in the coming days. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, and make sure you make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.